It's the Jack
and Kathy
Show.
Shit Show.
And there we go.
Yeah, how was
okay,
that?
that,
Did you like
I
that
think
one?
I think it. Yeah.
Okay. I have to tell you, we are super excited to be here, Sue Hansen.
I didn't do it.
You didn't do what?
It.
Oh, it. Yes, you feel so guilty walking into a law
I'm
office.
definitely
You just
nervous, that's for
naturally
sure.
start sweating, Jack
do.
Oner. We have a special guest with us today, Sue Hansen of Hansen Hildebrand, attorney at law. Wonderful. So let me just back up. I want you to introduce yourself, but I met you because you helped me with my process of divorce. And to most people, this concept of talking about divorce is always like a downer, right?
Well,
But-
especially when we have a relationship podcast.
Yeah,
Right.
This podcast is about relationships, and granted, what Jack and I talk about isn't always a bed of roses, right? We try to keep it real, and sometimes those conversations are difficult. But I met with you for personal reasons, and Jack and I came to meet with you for our other business reasons, and we asked you to be on our podcast, and you are honoring us with that gift. So I will please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll start rolling into some questions.
Okay. I'm Sue Hansen, and I'm used to operating in the privacy of my law office, not on camera, but I'll do my best.
You're doing great.
Do my best to engage.
Oh my God, that's so
I
good.
am a lawyer, and I'm a partner at Hansen and Hildebrand, and we are a family law firm, a small firm, and we focus primarily on divorce and estate planning. And our work in divorce is somewhat unique within the Wisconsin area, and that is that we really try to help couples find reasonable, respectful, and peaceful resolutions. So it is a relationship building as well as the unhooking that comes with a divorce.
Yeah.
And we do some individual representation, and we do a lot of divorce mediation.
Right.
My practice now is all mediation, meaning I work with couples as a neutral lawyer. I function as an educator, a guide, help them navigate through the process, again, with some mutual regard and a focus on the entire family relationships. My partners do some individual representation as well, but again, looking at respectful negotiation and problem solving rather than the high conflict court-based
Yes.
approach that often is the case for divorce. So
Yeah.
we're really looking to try to make a positive difference in helping families both separate and in some ways uncouple, but also to keep an eye on the family relationships as they create a resolution.
Yes, I want to almost clap right now for that because I'm such a believer in what you do. And when I found myself, none of us get married thinking, oh, well, when I get divorced someday, right? It was something that was a slow evolution in my life. And when it came to the point where I knew in the depths of my soul that I wasn't with my life partner and started to take steps to figure out what I was going to do about it. It's so frightening to think about. And all I knew about was horrible divorces. I thought, you go hire a lawyer, each of you hire a lawyer, you take a big pile of money to go do so. Everybody, the lawyer loads the chamber of, whatever they're going to fire at the other side, and you go to your corners, duke it out, and hopefully there's not too much carnage at the end of the day, but you're broke and everybody's sad. This is truly what I thought divorce was like. And so when I stumbled into the option of mediation and then met you, it truly was a breath of fresh air because my personal story was with my two kids when I shared with them, hey, would you be surprised that your dad and I are just more like friends than we are a married couple? And I remember specifically my son saying to me, Mom, these days I have so many friends whose parents are divorced. It's not that abnormal anymore, but I will tell you, I really hope you and Dad don't fight. And I was like, ooh, big nugget there, right?
Yeah, wow.
So when I discovered when I met you and what you do and the process of mediation being an alternative, and it doesn't work for everybody, right? I felt like I was so relieved. I was so relieved. And I appreciated your neutrality. And that's the whole idea, right? That you are guiding the process and making the process fair. But also you got to gather a lot of information, and I didn't have to make those decisions. I leaned on you to make those decisions. So and Jack, you had a similar
Yeah,
process with
we
your
went.
divorce.
I had family members that had gone through traditional divorces, and being the primary breadwinner, my wife hadn't worked for 14 years.
which is not unusual.
No,
No?
and that wasn't just her choice, that was ours, right? She wanted to stay at home, and we said, let's do this. All of my friends said, start stockpiling money now. Hide it, send it overseas. And I went, oh man, this can't be the way to do things. And then I thought I was going to be broke. Mm-hmm. And then stumbled across an article, just happened to be in the Chicago Tribune, about mediation and how it was picking up steam. This is going 7 years ago in Chicago, so going back 7 years. And happened to read about the several firms that they talked about in the article. So I called every single one of them, landed with one that I felt really good about. And it ended up being the best thing, not only from a cost perspective, like, 'cause there's some of that too, right? But it just felt better. I felt like I was with a guidance counselor as opposed to someone that was battling things, which brings me to a point that I'd like to throw in. We were watching and prep for this podcast some of the videos that you've produced on your website, and you tell a story about how you got a letter from a client who said her wedding had occurred and she danced with her husband. And that there wouldn't have been ex-husband, rather.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, let's be clear. Right. They got back together because of the divorce. No. And Kathy and I were listening to this on the drive today, and we went, "That's it. Like, that's what mediation and what you do is all about, is to keep those things intact, because it's hard enough on the people going through it. It's hard on the kids. Why make it worse, right?"
And Sue, you started as for lack of a better word, a typical divorce attorney, right? And you had your own journey to come to the mediation process. Can you tell us a little bit more about your personal journey to coming to the side of mediation and building a practice with it?
I'd like to think I was never completely typical, but I will
sure
say
you weren't.
for the first 20 years of my practice, I had what was then available, which was representing individuals navigating divorce and within the shadow of the court, and using the law as kind of a touchstone, with always the ultimatum or potential of turning to the courts to make decisions for the family. And I frankly tired fairly early in my career of being a weapon in that war. I felt like I was more an agent of destruction. We looked at divorce as destroying a family. We looked at the costs, not only financial but emotional. And then came collaborative divorce, and collaborative divorce meant each person had a lawyer, but all four committed to an out-of-court resolution process.
Right.
So while there were two lawyers involved, they were committing to function more as settlement specialists. We also brought in what has transformed my career, which is the interdisciplinary approach. And that meant we were working more with child and family specialists, psychologists and therapists skilled in child development and family systems, so that they were helping with crafting a plan for the family to physically separate but remain connected as family members. We also worked with financial specialists. So if there was a business or financial issues, we brought in one neutral instead of dueling experts. So the collaborative was the start of my sort of journey to a really different approach. And then came mediation, which is one neutral lawyer working jointly with the couple together. And as a mediator, it means I can't take people separately and give them legal advice. We don't operate under the umbrella of the court. It's a completely out-of-court process. And I become, as a lawyer, an educator, and a navigator through the process. I help them problem solve, consider options, and ultimately reach agreements. It is a complete transformation from individual advocacy in an adversarial court process to being a neutral lawyer in an out-of-court process.
Yes.
But it allows me to frankly do what I went to law school to do, which was to help people and to help children and to help families.
Right, right. And I remember my first phone call with you, because this was sort of during COVID stuff, so we were only having phone calls. We weren't meeting in person at all. And I remember you saying, you know, talking about the neutrality of your role in this, and that you won't allow a husband to whisper in your right ear or the wife to whisper something in your left ear without sharing it with the other side. That is not, you know, if anybody tries to play that game, you're not playing. And I really, really appreciated that, because I think that, I don't know, that just felt extraordinarily honest to me, and I really had a deep appreciation for that process, and that you were so upfront with that.
Well, it's, if I can just add this, and I'm curious to hear your point of view, because you're on the side watching all of these dynamics take place, and my experience was similar to yours in that we both left our spouses. We had both said, this isn't working anymore. So we were the leavers, right? Not the leavees.
That's fair.
Not levies, but leavees, right? And so that was still hard, right? Because there's all this emotion tied in of, I just want to get my life started, right? And then to sit down in front of that, in that mediation environment, it was almost like I was looking for an advocate for me sometimes, because I wanted to say, why are you asking for that? I gave you so many things already in life, right? And I don't know if you felt similarly, that it was hard for me, as being on the end of it was difficult, because I needed an advocate for me, but I realized that the mediation was the right thing to do for the family. If that makes any sense at all, as I'm describing that dialectic I was going through, that pull of, I want my freedom and I want these things because I've been doing blah, blah, blah. And at the same time, all right, if I punish this person I've been with for 25 years, my kids aren't gonna, right? Do you feel that when people come together? I mean, did you feel that when you went through your divorce, that it was hard to be collaborative?
No, I wanted it to be peaceful.
You did?
Yeah,
did you feel that your ex, and this is not disparaging our partners, but did you feel that it was tough? Here you are, you're not getting along anymore, right? To where you're going to dissolve something you've been together for a long time, and now you've got to come together. Do you know what I'm getting at?
And let me be clear, there'll be no discussion of specific mediation cases.
No, you certainly don't want that, but it's the emotion, right?
At its core, whether in divorce or anywhere else, we all like to feel we're right. We all like to have people on our side.
Yes.
That's just kind of a natural human reaction. And whether you're the leaver or leavee, it's painful.
Right.
It is a complete upheaval and restructuring of your life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything about your family and your finances and your future is impacted by divorce.
Yep.
And so we can talk as lawyers about no-fault divorce, but in the eyes of most couples, they each have their view of fault.
That's right.
Yeah.
Having said
Very
that,
true.
I think very few, some want to inflict harm or damage, or there's been abuse, or there's real safety issues. I don't want to minimize the cases that really might need protective orders or court involvement.
Sure.
Yeah.
But for most people going through divorce, it really is trying to tap into how can we get through this and still look in the mirror and look in the eyes of our children and maintain our self-respect. And every marriage has its ups and downs. There were wonderful times and there were not wonderful times. And there are things that can lead to a divorce, but it doesn't have to mean hostility and anger. I don't like to use the word fairness. It's a very subjective word on what's fair to each spouse.
For sure.
But they have to find a livable result. and something that each can say yes to, and that can keep their family still able to be intact.
Yep.
Yeah.
The reality is, if you have children, you're a family for forever.
That's right.
You might be
Yep.
a hostile,
Yeah.
That's right.
negative, unpleasant family, or
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
might be able to sit in the bleachers together and dance at your adult child's wedding and be there for grandkids and whatever life
That's right.
brings you. We know the harm that comes to kids from conflict.
Yes.
To your point, Kathy, of what your son said, it's
Yep.
not so much the divorce. The divorce rate has remained about 50%. It's really the level of conflict
Yes.
that's harmful to
I
the
love that.
adults as well as to children.
Yeah.
Yes.
So parents who look at me and say, I would do anything for my children, then I need them to focus on having a peaceful divorce and
Right.
a reasonable, caring relationship with their
Right.
ex-spouse.
Yeah.
And divorce is certainly difficult, but mediation gives an option and a path for couples to really try to focus on restructuring their family, not destroying their family, restructuring their finances, not just fighting over who gets more or less.
Yep.
And so my view as a mediator is I'm opening the door, I'm giving a process, I'm going to help manage it, I'm going to assure fully informed decision-making and balanced negotiations, but ultimately the outcome in mediation is
Yeah.
up to the couple.
Yeah, you're not going to push the couple through the door.
Yeah,
You're
that's-
going to open
yeah.
the door and they have to elect to walk through it. And how is there a typical way that couples are or individuals are finding you and your firm in this mediation process? Is it, a Google search that most people or word of mouth?
Probably the biggest challenge for mediation, which has grown quite a bit, and in Wisconsin in particular, our state Supreme Court basically paved the way for mediation by recognizing that a lawyer can ethically
Well,
function as a
Yes,
neutral
and
with a couple.
you made that
well,
change.
and they're not going to find out about her through this podcast. That's for sure. We got
Well,
9 listeners, maybe.
9 listeners will find, and they might know one other person.
Let's talk about that, because that's a really it's an interesting dynamic that it's outside the legal process. Because I remember you said that the first time we met, we were talking about some other business things. So talk about what you've done, because you've done some spectacular stuff here to change
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And the role
Well,
that
You're
we
very
have.
humble. I know you are.
I've done none of it
Believe me,
myself.
there's 8 people. My
Yes.
mom's going to love you.
Yeah, there's a core of people who
Yes.
really care
Yeah.
about trying to find a better way for families through separation and divorce. And we did get a rule through the state Supreme Court that says lawyers can function not just as adversarial advocates in a court dispute, but as neutral educators and guide in family cases only. So they recognize that what we have right now is an explosion of do-it-yourself divorce.
Yeah.
The estimate in Wisconsin is 70% no lawyers. And
What does that look like? I mean, I couldn't
It
imagine
sounds like
doing
it looks
that.
like a hot mess, if you ask me.
well, certainly
Because having gone through the process, there's a lot.
Things I would have never known, and to Google that
look
stuff, I'd
through.
still feel inadequate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and there's different perspectives. So from the couple's perspective, it can mean they don't know what they don't know. And if you have children,
That was
a
me.
home,
Yeah.
retirement, businesses, it's not just checking boxes. And so some of those 70% get through their divorce, low cost, quickly, efficiently, but they didn't know what they didn't know, and they end up with conflict later.
Right,
Regrets,
for
resentments, anger, returns to court
Yes.
to try to
Can't
fix or
imagine.
change mistakes.
Yes.
And then let me say, from the court's perspective,
Yes.
hot mess would describe a system that was designed for people who have lawyers who are now trying to bounce around a courthouse, and the poor court clerks and everyone else trying to help them figure out how to get through
Yes.
a multi-step legal process
Yes.
that impacts every aspect of their life. And for some lawyers, I will say, some of us have embraced the role of neutrality and problem solving. For others, it is a paradigm shift and quantum leap that when you've been a debate expert and advocate and use the court system to get results, stepping out of that system into a room with a couple is a drastic change for some that
those are
they
new,
will not
those
be
are
able
new
to
muscles, new untrained muscles.
To that end, my brother-in-law, who's a partner in a law firm in Chicago, has said what we learn more is how to debate well. That's what he felt law school was about, was how to argue a case or argue a point. And so now you're not doing that anymore when you have two people that are on different sides, so to speak.
It's debate, and it's very much a win-lose.
Yeah.
You win at a
Sure.
trial.
Absolutely.
You win emotion.
Yeah,
Or you
got
lost that case. When in fact, that may work better with criminal cases, with business litigation, with collection actions about money. That type of adversarial process simply does not work for families.
Yeah.
No.
And so
Yes.
looking at win-lose means that loser's upset, hurt, angry, and in the middle of that is too often children caught in that conflict, caught in that hostility. And so to me, the family system needs more of a transactional restructuring. How are we going to help you go from living together and commingling everything from your children to your bank accounts to separating? And so the idea is to give education skills and tools to help people do that restructuring. So the court system, not well equipped for family cases to begin with, where there's this huge emotional aspect where psychologists and therapists and others can play an integral role in helping people navigate. That's not part of our court system.
Right.
And so the courts are overwhelmed and overloaded.
I was going to comment on that, how bogged down they must get with the number of cases.
The delays, the time it takes. There simply isn't a good system in place. And so we're seeing more people either opt for do-it-yourself, or certainly my focus is to help them understand that one neutral lawyer as a mediator can be a really effective, efficient way to navigate, but to make better informed decisions.
Yes, and 1,000,000,000%. It was, I knew enough to know that I didn't know enough. And in talking with you, you had mentioned that a lot of people think they can do it themselves because you can go online and download the forms. You can do that. But I just knew that there's something I'm going to miss, and I don't want to go through this again, and I don't feel like, I also didn't feel I was qualified to ask some of the questions that you asked too. Like you overturned things that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have thought to ask about that one. That was a good move. Or I wouldn't have had the strength to ask for it, because for me, especially when I'm in a place of pain, I tended to feel weaker, and I don't have my strong voice in those situations. And I also didn't want to fight. So sometimes I probably would have found myself giving something up just to keep the peace. And then 6 months later, realizing what an idiot I was for not standing my ground in that moment or that thing or whatever. So that really, really helped me. And just circling back to, I know you don't want to toot your own horn.
I know she's so humble, but I know where you're going, because
I do remember you mentioning that in Wisconsin, it used to be that mediators, once you did all your paperwork and submitted it to the courts, the entities still needed to hire lawyers to review what your written, suggestion to the court. And you were one of the advocates to making that change in Wisconsin, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So I was part of a committee, and we anticipated a lot of opposition.
Sure.
Because what we were proposing is that one lawyer representing nobody. So as a mediator, I don't represent either spouse, nor can I represent them jointly.
Yes.
So I'm an out-of-court neutral educator and guide, but now I can draft and electronically file all the documents needed from beginning to end in a divorce, which makes far greater value to the mediation process, because people get the value of my legal expertise, knowledge, and experience, but I don't appear in court. I don't take sides. I simply guide them through. And I guess want to say that the key component for mediation isn't so much about standing ground and strength. It is about education, and my role is to assure that both parties really fully understand.
Yes.
What are their options? What's the legal impact? What's the tax effect? What's the effect on their children? I'm going to ask the questions and bring in the resources to make sure that's considered.
Right.
Ultimately, yes, it's up to them, but I'm going to do that in that process so that they find their own voice, create their own resolution. People will agree to most anything at various points in their divorce just to get it over with.
Yeah,
They just want it done.
Exactly.
And yet, if they don't do it right, they're likely to re-engage in conflict. So
Right.
my goal is to help
Right.
them do it right the first time
Right.
to avoid any return to court.
Yes, yes. And I remember that being one of the final questions when I was staring at all the final paperwork and everything. And that's one of the questions you mentioned was, do you both want to check the box that says we're not going to come back and revisit this? You know, if I win the lottery tomorrow, I think that was even your example. You know, will the other person agree that it's you know, they're not going to come back to the table to try to wreak havoc on something? And we both chose to check the box. I don't know how often people do, but that was something that I thought was a very important element, and I felt so happy to have you explaining so many of those.
Well, I have
that
to,
part of the process.
without going into any cases, I have to believe it's such you're not arbitration. You're not sitting there trying to get two rival parties to see sides differently. You are truly asking people to sit next to one another side by side and tackle a problem that is as huge as anything, right? This isn't how do we deal with mom's sickness or our own sicknesses. You're asking people that don't want to be together to come together. How did you, there's a level of psychology with that to me, because you even heard in Kathy's voice, right, and you addressed it, that am I being represented well? I said it to you. Is someone my advocate here? Because man, I did a lot of good things, right? We all have, you even said it too. We all have our viewness of what fairness is. What drives you? I'm really curious about this. What's behind all this for you? What drives this to get people to say, let's do this right, and let's stay in the same, because I know I'm all over the place. You are spot on. When you have kids, you are married for life, right? So what's behind this for you?
I think I had a number of experiences, and I'm not an arbitrator, I'm not a judge, but I also realize there is rarely one right answer, and if there is, the parties themselves need to find it, because taking outside legal resources to decide what's your time with your children, how much do you get of your assets, do you get to stay in your home or not, we know so little about the families we deal with. And probably the most transformative experience I had was following a divorce trial. And there was a dispute over children and assets and money. And I represented one spouse, the wife in that case, and another lawyer represented the husband, and we had a trial. We had testimony, we had witnesses, the whole thing. It's very rare that occurs, but it occurred. And at the end of the trial, the judge made a decision.
Yeah.
About each of the issues, children, money, income, property. And frankly, it was everything I had argued for and more. And I did not react inappropriately and go, yes.
Yeah.
But in my head, I thought, wow,
Yeah.
we won.
Yeah.
And we went out in the hallway, and my client sat on a bench and sobbed.
Yes.
And I looked
Yeah.
at her, I said,
Wow.
well, what's wrong?
Yeah.
I'm thinking she doesn't understand
Yes.
what we
How
just
well,
won.
how well this went, and I'm making air quotes.
This was like everything
Wow.
we could have strategically worked for. And she looked at me and she said, did you see his face? I said, whose face? She said, my husband's face. Did you see his face? We'll never be able to raise our children together. And I went, oh
Wow.
my. My definition as a lawyer of winning Had nothing to do with her definition of what she wanted for her future. And it really was eye-opening to me to stand back and say, wait, we need to listen better. We need to help tap into something other than needing protection, being angry. Can I get the most? Can I give my spouse the least? And it really impacted me in trying to look more through the lens of the family as a whole and not just try to be a debater and argue for the most or the least for my clients. So I think that really impacted. If you had said to me then, which was about 15 years ago, that I would work with couples, I would have said you were crazy.
Wow.
And I'm a lawyer.
Yeah.
I work with my client and I work in this system.
Yep.
And then you're going to put me in a room
Yeah.
with divorcing couples. And it's the most profoundly satisfying work I've ever done, because I got to see people in their relationship with each other. If I just hear one person's side, it's easy to be an advocate for that side,
Right.
but I don't know the other person's
That's
side.
right.
But also, if we debate, we're going high-low bargaining and we're arguing. These are often couples who have spent years caring about each other deeply, raising children together.
Right.
Yep.
At points, they deeply loved each other, may
That's right.
still.
Yeah.
And if I can help them uncouple with grace and integrity, I think it's the best gift I can give.
This could not be the most perfect ending point right here. I hate to cut us off, but it was beautiful. And so
That-
for the 6
you
people
summed
that
it up
follow
very,
our
very well.
podcast,
This
was wonderful. We really appreciate you talking about it. You know, Kathy and I have a relationship podcast. That's what the Jack and Kathy Shit Show is called. And we did this because Kathy finds our story amazing, that we had gone through similar divorce experiences. We never talk about our spouses or anything else on this show.
not in terms of like
Not this
negative,
stuff. No,
you know.
never. I mean, we never will. And of the few followers we have, there's a few more than 8. They love the fact that we go into different depths of the pool, if you will, right? I tend to prefer the shallows.
With a cocktail,
Right.
cold beer in the shallow on a floaty.
And I hope this podcast doesn't, we're not having this podcast to encourage divorce, right? That's not the part of this.
Not at all. Not at all.
I think it's a good exposure to what we both experienced as couples in our marriage. And I am honored to meet you. And hearing that story, I'm trying to fight back tears right now. I know you're not. It's a beautiful story because I'll cap this off for you. My daughter's getting married June 24th. In fact, up here in Saukville. And recently we met to go over all the processional stuff, right? And so how do you see us walking into the church? How does your mom want to do things? Because we're the divorced side of the couple. Her fiance's family is still married. So while I'm not married anymore and get along, we see my ex-wife all the time at sporting events and stuff like that. We decided to, when I suggested to her, how do you see us sitting in the church? Because she knows Kathy's a big part of my life and my ex doesn't have a partner right now. So I said, well, we have the latitude to do whatever we want. How about we said 2 chairs? 2 for the parents of your fiance and me and your mom sitting next to one another. And so the rest of our families are going to sit behind us. And my daughter's eyes well up and she goes, that's perfect. I truly only believe that's possible, not simply because we went through a collaborative, mediated environment, but because we had that attitude that said this is a better way to do it than be confrontational. So listening to your story about a mom dancing with her ex, and you telling that story right now is beautiful. You are an amazing human being, and I truly mean it. I'm in awe of what you're taking on because it's not easy. Sorry, you're crying
Agreed.
out.
I know. Now you got me going a little bit.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
You're amazing. I really appreciate you being on this. I know it's not easy to do it. We'll send you a copy of it so you can watch it over and over again, and then you can tell us what you want us to edit.
just be replaying what I should have said for the next 6 months.
And as long as there's no one opening the door and telling me I owe parking ticket money or stuff like that, because we're in a law office. Thank you for doing this with us.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
My goal is to change the culture of family law. It
Yes.
needn't be all drama, trauma. And for those couples who are willing to do the work, we just need to give the opportunity and open the door to a process that lets them be their better selves and keep a focus on their families. So
Yeah.
I appreciate any opportunity. You asked about marketing. There's no way you'll see billboards or
No.
TV ads.
Exactly.
I don't have that kind of funding,
Yeah.
but I'll continue my effort to spread the word, and I appreciate your help.
Yeah, you got it.
For sure.
You got it.
You're amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So if you could just do
Thank
a
you,
quick
Sue
thing. We do
Hansen.
this every time we sign out. So just say, look at the camera and say peace. Thank you.
I have a peace sign.
Oh, you do?
What's that?
I'm wearing a peace
Oh,
sign.
yeah. I didn't see that. That's great. Well, thank you very much, Sue. We
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you,
That was
Sue.
outstanding.
You rock.
Jack and Kathy Shit Show outro take 652.
You just listened to another episode of the Jack and Kathy Shit Show.
Our senior producers are me.
Hey, and me,
This episode was produced, engineered, and mixed by.
the amazing Key Honar.
Email your questions, comments, or interesting relationship stories to jackandkathyshitshow@gmail.com. That is Kathy with a C.
Be sure to follow and like our marvelous shit show on Instagram and TikTok at Jack and Kathy Shit Show. Apparently, liking and following is a thing.
It is.
Yeah.
This episode was produced by Pint Productions 2022. Point!